Imagine standing on a mountain that suddenly starts to violently shake beneath your feet. That's exactly what happened one day when Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was standing on Mount Uhud. Alongside him were the three future great caliphs of Islam, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, may Allah be pleased with them. As the earthquake struck and the mountain trembled, the Prophet struck the ground and commanded, "Be still, O Uhud, for upon you stand a prophet, a Siddiq, truthful one, and two martyrs." Years later, after the Prophet had passed away, Caliph Umar never forgot those words. Throughout his reign, he would constantly make a very unusual prayer. "O Allah, grant me martyrdom, but let it be in the city of your messenger, Medina." People would hear this and ask in disbelief, how is that possible? All the wars in Arabia are over, and Medina is the safest city in the world. Who would martyr you here? But Umar's faith was unshakable. He would simply reply, "If Allah wills it, it will happen." And when Umar's martyrdom finally came, it wasn't a minor event. Before he fell, Caliph Umar had built the greatest empire the world had ever seen. From the time of Adam to his era, no one had built an empire this vast. Not Alexander the Great, not Julius Caesar, not even the pharaohs. Yet today, while the world remembers Alexander as the Great, sadly, outside the Muslim world, Umar is often just remembered as Umar. Even Google just calls him Umar. The truth is, Alexander's empire was nothing compared to the Caliphate of Umar. Umar's record stood unbroken for centuries, until 600 years later, when a king we all know very well finally surpassed it. Now, one of the greatest achievements of Caliph Umar's reign was the conquest of Egypt, the land of the pharaohs, which was the most powerful and wealthy region of the world at that time. But while all the Muslims' attention was focused on Egypt, the Persian king finally got some time to relax. He used this time to send his final letters to all his generals and his people, warning them, "If you don't wake up now, Umar will destroy our 800-year-old Persian Empire forever." Following this, the people of the Persian Empire picked up their swords, forming a massive army from all sides, preparing for one final war against the Muslims. One final war against the Muslims. When Caliph Umar in Medina found out about this, he decided to gather the entire Muslim army in one place and personally lead them in the final battle against the Persian Empire. However, his senior minister, Ali, stopped him, advising, "If we gather the entire Muslim army in one place, the Roman Empire might take advantage and attack us." Caliph Umar really liked this advice from Ali. He abandoned his own plan, accepted Ali's advice, and instead gathered small contingents from every region to launch a final assault on the Persian Empire. In this way, the Muslims once again began conquering many forts of the Persian Empire. The story of one particular fort is very important to understand because its leader was Hormuzan, the most powerful general of the Persian Empire at the time. The Muslims faced immense difficulty in conquering Hormuzan's city. But as soon as the city fell, Hormuzan fled from the Muslim army and they chased after him. While fleeing, Hormuzan climbed the tallest building in his city and shouted loudly, "I have 100 arrows, and with these 100 arrows, I will pick off the Muslims one by one. But I have one condition. If the Muslims promise to take me to Umar bin Khattab, I am ready to surrender." The Muslims replied, "Fine, what's the big deal in that?" So, they captured Hormuzan and sent him straight to the Caliph in Medina. Hormuzan entered Medina for the first time, expecting Caliph Umar to have a massive palace and be seated in a grand court like other kings. But he was utterly shocked to see that the ruler of such a vast empire was resting on the ground in a simple building. It is said that upon seeing this, Hormuzan even asked, "Where are the Caliph's guards?" He was told that Caliph Umar didn't need such things. The people woke up Umar and told him, "This great general of the Persian Empire has come to meet you." But Umar said, "I will not speak to him as long as he is wearing these royal kingly clothes. Go and change his clothes." When Hormuzan changed his clothes and appeared before Umar like a common man, Umar finally allowed him to approach. However, because so many Muslims had already been martyred because of Hormuzan, Umar had already decided to sentence him to death. But as soon as he arrived, Hormuzan asked for water. When he was given water, Hormuzan spoke up in front of everyone and said to Umar, "Promise me that no one will kill me until I drink this water." As soon as Umar agreed to Hormuzan's condition, Hormuzan threw the water on the ground and said, "I haven't drank the water, and in fact, I can never drink this water now. So according to your promise, no one can kill me." Following this clever trick, Hormuzan quickly accepted Islam, thereby saving his life in Medina. Seeing this, Umar forgave Hormuzan. But Umar knew that Hormuzan wasn't an ordinary man. As the former army chief of the entire Persian Empire, he knew every corner of it. Therefore, Umar not only allowed Hormuzan to stay in Medina, but also made him his advisor regarding the Persian Empire. But Umar didn't know that one day, this very Hormuzan would play a huge role in his assassination. When the Persian king found out about the capture of his army chief, Hormuzan, he was furious, as it was a massive insult to the Persian Empire. He began gathering his forces even faster. Eventually, he assembled a massive army from across the entire Persian Empire and prepared to fight the final battle against the Muslims in the Iranian city of Nahavand. Now, there is some confusion as to who delivered the news of the gathering Persian army to Umar, whether it was the old governor, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, or the new governor, Umar bin Yasir, who was a great companion whose parents were the first to give their lives for Islam. When Umar found out, he called a meeting of all his ministers and asked them what should be done. Uthman advised him that he should personally take a large army to fight the Persian king. But Ali argued, no, the Caliph should stay in Medina and send someone else. Once again, Umar favored Ali's advice. He gathered a large army of 30,000 men and dispatched them for the final war against the Persian Empire. Following this, the last massive battle between Islam and Persia took place at Nahavand. In the end, with great difficulty, the Muslims won this battle. But this battle was so fierce that after Yarmouk and Qadisiyah, the highest number of casualties occurred here, and the Muslim general Nu'man bin Muqarrin was also martyred in this fight. The Muslims won the battle, but this victory changed Islamic history forever. During this battle, the Muslims captured a man named Piruz. After the battle, the Arabs named him Abu Lulu'a, and he became a slave of Mughira bin Shuba. But Piruz was very different from other slaves. He was an expert blacksmith of that era. Seeing his skills, his master, Mughira bin Shuba, brought him to the Muslim capital, Medina, where he worked as an ironsmith for his master and settled down. Meanwhile, back in the Persian Empire, the Muslims now had a free hand and easily began conquering every region. A Muslim army reached as far north as Azerbaijan. Another Muslim army, for the first time in history during Umar's caliphate, crossed the borders of India and entered what is today the Balochistan region of Pakistan. In this way, the entire region and the entire Persian Empire were finished forever. Seeing this, the Persian king also fled from the Muslims. When he couldn't find refuge anywhere in the world, he was forced to go and live in China, where the Chinese emperor welcomed him warmly. This was the grandson of the very same Persian king to whom Prophet Muhammad had sent a letter years ago inviting him to Islam, and whose grandfather had arrogantly torn the Prophet's letter into pieces. But now Umar's army had conquered the entire Persian Empire forever. The Muslim Caliphate, which was once just a small state in Medina, had now expanded to India and China and was the world's biggest superpower. However, just as the Muslim army approached the borders of Pakistan, this marked the final days of Caliph Umar's reign. Just days later, Umar would be martyred. The issue was that the slave the Muslims had captured and brought to Medina shortly before this, Piruz, or Abu Lulu'a, lived with the Muslims in Medina but was never happy there. It is said that whenever he saw the children of his region in Medina, he would say, "Because of these Arabs we are ruined today." Furthermore, he would repeatedly say, "I wish I had died in the Battle of Nahavand before seeing the slavery of these Arabs." In short, Piruz harbored a deep hatred for the Muslims in his heart. With this hatred, one day, Piruz went to Caliph Umar and complained, "My master Mughira oppresses me greatly. He forces me to pay him 2 dirhams every day from my earnings." 2 dirhams. Umar's caliphate had expanded so rapidly that the Muslims hadn't even had the time to mint their own currency yet. In their caliphate, Muslims used the silver dirham coins minted by the Persian Empire. If we look at the value of Abu Lulu'a's 2 dirhams today, it would be around 1,500 rupees. When he told Umar this price, Umar asked him, "What work do you do?" He replied, "I work with wood and iron." Umar then told him, "Then this amount is completely fair." Hearing this, Piruz became furious. In front of everyone, he declared, "Umar's justice is for everyone in the world, except for me," and walked away. Umar sent Piruz away, but he still intended to speak to his master Mughira about it so that he might reduce the tax. A few days later, Umar saw Piruz again in the market of Medina. Trying to lighten his mood, Umar said, "Abu Lulua, I've heard you make excellent grinding mills. Will you make one for me too?" But Piruz's heart was still filled with the same anger towards Umar. He replied, "Why not? I will make such a grinding mill for you that the whole world will remember it from this day forward." He said this in such a tone that Umar understood Piruz was threatening him. He even mentioned this to the other companions, saying, "This man has threatened me." But the law of Islam is that no one can arrest another person merely on suspicion, even if they are a king. Therefore, even after this threat, Umar let Piruz go. This meant that despite being the caliph of the entire empire, Umar did not consider himself above the law. After making this threat, Piruz left, but he had decided in his heart that he would not leave Umar alive. First, Piruz went and started forging a very dangerous and unique dagger. It was a dagger held from the center, with very sharp blades on both sides. Not only that, but as soon as the dagger was ready, Piruz began preparing a deadly poison. The poison commonly used by Persians in that era was mostly extracted from the hemlock plant. Though it looks beautiful, even a tiny speck of it burns a person completely from the inside. It was the favorite poison of assassins in that era. It is said that many years before this, the great philosopher Socrates was also killed using this very poison. Piruz soaked his unique dagger in this poison overnight. Early the next morning, before the Fajr prayer, he went and hid in a corner of the Prophet's mosque, Masjid an-Nabawi, waiting for Caliph Umar. The next day, as soon as Umar heard the call to prayer Adhan for Fajr, he woke up and headed to the mosque to lead his final prayer. Before Umar even arrived, the Muslims had already formed rows for the prayer. Even then, Umar walked past each row, instructing them, "O Muslims, straighten your rows." At this moment, shortly before his martyrdom, Umar's caliphate stretched from Algeria in the west to India in the east. If you combine 25 or 30 modern-day countries, that equals the size of Umar's caliphate alone. But it is crucial to understand that the Prophet ﷺ had prophesied all of this beforehand. Just 25 years before Umar's martyrdom, when the Prophet ﷺ had only a few followers in Mecca and they were heavily persecuted, even in those harsh conditions, the Prophet would tell everyone, "One day, these very Muslims will conquer the world's two superpowers, the Roman and Persian empires." Hearing this, the people of Mecca would always mock him, saying, "These Muslims can't even protect themselves from us, how will they fight superpowers?" But today, just a few years later, Umar had fulfilled these prophecies of the Prophet PBUA during his reign, as the Muslims were now the world's greatest superpower, and Umar was the most powerful ruler. Finally, Umar stood before the Muslims in the place of the Imam and started the prayer, saying Allahu Akbar. It is said that Umar would recite Surah Yusuf in every Fajr prayer, a surah in which Prophet Yusuf the Joseph goes from being a slave to the leader of all of Egypt. And today, that same Egypt was just a small province in Umar's caliphate. But now, in the final prayer of his life, as soon as Umar began, Abu Lulua rushed from behind at full speed and struck Umar fiercely with his poisoned dagger, and then struck him again and again. In a rapid frenzy, Abu Lulua stabbed Umar 6 times and Umar collapsed to the ground. Seeing this, the Muslims behind him tried to capture Abu Lulua. Trying to escape, Piruz martyred 9 other people with the same dagger. Finally, when the Muslims overpowered him, Piruz slit his own throat with the dagger and committed suicide. The Muslims standing further back didn't know that Umar had been attacked. They were confused as to why Umar had suddenly stopped the prayer. Seeing the situation, Abd al-Rahman ibn Awf stepped forward and completed the rest of Umar's prayer. A short while later, when Umar regained consciousness, he asked, "Ibn Abbas, who was the one who struck me?" He was told it was Mughira bin Shuba's slave, Piruz. Hearing this, Umar said, "Thank Allah that I was not killed by a Muslim who recites the kalima." This meant that Piruz had attacked the world's most powerful ruler, Caliph Umar, over a mere 2 dirhams. But there is another angle to this story. Ever since Piruz arrived in Medina, he was never happy there and hated the Muslims intensely. He kept his distance from the rest of Medina and only hung out with one person, the same Hormuzan. It is said that the very dagger used to kill Umar was seen by people in Hormuzan's possession just a day prior. Because of this, many historians argue that Piruz's attack wasn't a lone act, but a well-thought-out conspiracy by the Persian Empire, orchestrated by the former Persian general Hormuzan, sitting right there in Medina. This is why, a few days after Umar's martyrdom, one of his sons, Ubaidullah, took Hormuzan's life in retaliation. However, this remains a very controversial issue, and no one today knows exactly what happened there. Regardless, the Muslims carried Umar from the mosque to his home. The wounds on Umar's body were so deep that when he was brought home and given date water and milk to drink, instead of going into his stomach, it started pouring out of his wounds. Seeing this, Umar's doctor told him, "O commander of the faithful, remember Allah," meaning, you have very little time left. Hearing this, some people sitting near Umar began to cry. Umar scolded them, saying, "Whoever wants to cry should leave." Normally, people comfort a dying man. But Umar's personality was such that even after hearing the news of his impending death, he remained completely unfazed. Upon hearing the news of his death, Umar's first command was to calculate all his debts. It was found that Umar owed 86,000 dirhams. Umar ordered his son and family to pay off this debt after his passing. The people sitting nearby said, "What is the need for this? This is all money that you gave from your own pocket to the poor and orphans." But Umar refused to let it go. After his martyrdom, the very house in which he was martyred was sold to pay off his debt. And who bought this house? A very rich companion and future caliph, Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan. When the news spread throughout Medina that their beloved Caliph Umar would soon leave this world, cries of mourning erupted from every house. One companion even said that on the day of Umar's martyrdom, the people of Medina wept as if their only son had died in every household, because Umar hadn't ruled like a king, but like a father. As Umar lay on his bed drawing his final breaths, he called his son, Abdullah bin Umar, and shared his final wish. Go to the Prophet's wife, Aisha, and ask if Umar can be buried alongside his 2 companions. But remember, say Umar, do not say Commander of the Faithful. Umar did this because he didn't want this world. Islam's second caliph was laid to rest beside Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr in Medina. But before his passing, Umar had nominated 6 people for the next caliphate, leaving strict orders. As soon as I die, lock these 6 men in a house, and within just 3 days they must announce the next caliph of Islam.